really. It's a shame we can't get at the truth from all of these people who supposedly make the laws in this country. But let's bring in now Conservative peer Lord Daniel Finkelstein for his words of wisdom. Daniel, welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Extraordinary scenes, I think, this week for all of us who have been watching this Parliament for quite some time, several decades, in fact. Haven't seen anything like it for a very, very long time. You know, why did it suddenly spin out of control? And do you think that Lindsay Hoyle can continue in his job?
Look, at the bottom of this is something more serious than Lindsay Hoyle, and that is the Parliament of this country being threatened by protesters and changing its stance on debate as a result of those threats? This is a very serious allegation. I'm much more interested in that than I am in Lindsay Hoyle's individual position. I'm much more interested in that than what the House of Commons ends up pointlessly saying about Gaza. So there are some people who say, you know, they've been distracted from the real issue into this side issue. I think we've accidentally hit on the real issue. Are we really saying that members of British Parliament cannot conduct their business in the way that they would wish because they're worried about being about protesters in their offices and in their constituencies? Because if we are, then this is a matter that is extremely serious. It threatens the basis of political democracy in this country. So I couldn't be more exercised about it, I think.
Well, it doesn't help, does it, when the police are outside watching a projection of a statement saying from the river to the sea onto Big Ben, onto the Palace of Westminster. They've issued a statement tonight saying that in certain contexts, it's not a criminal offence, i.e. when it's part of a public protest. They're basically giving a green light to these characters to turn up every time there's a debate that they don't like.
But the police have got to make a judgment as to what they think a court will find. But I think this statement, it does clearly indicate that these people want to expel all the Jews that live in Israel, which is half the Jewish population in the world, by the way. And I do think that having constant, very large demonstrations with these sorts of slogans is quite intimidating. I know lots of people in the Jewish community feel that. And you've got to get the line right, haven't you, between allowing people to say things which I may regard as awful and trying to ensure they don't say intimidating things. It's clear that they are saying things that now the Speaker of the House of Commons says caused him to change his decision. We cannot leave it like that. Either Lindsay Hoyle does have to resign. He admits that he is not giving a faithful representation of his motives, or, as I think is probably true, he is giving a faithful representation of his motives. The Labour Party told him that they could not safely conduct political business unless he allowed them to change the rules of the House of Commons. Well, that is extremely serious, and we can't just leave it there. We can't just not, if now that this has been said, we need to have a proper inquiry into what went on. And I don't mean this for the purposes of finding whether Labour or the Tories or the SNP are to blame, which I'm not interested in the slightest. What I'm interested in is whether these protesters are now putting Parliament in a position where our democracy doesn't function properly. And if that is the case, what are the police, the Home Office, the legal system going to do to ensure the integrity of our democracy? That seems to me much more important. And so there are some people who think this is all pompous Westminster fuss. You use the phrase, which I agree with a lot of your intro. I didn't agree with the phrase "privileged politicians." We haven't got any choice but to have politicians run the country, unless we want it to be run by a dictatorship.
Yes.
But given,
but I think they're still seen as privileged by most of the country, though, Daniel.
They are. It's not my choice of rhetoric. I think that they're running down the way that politicians, we don't need to get diverted into that. We have a disagreement over that. But where I agree with you, very strongly is you hit the nail on the head at the beginning of the programme. The issue here is violent intimidation. You got that completely right. A lot of other commentators, I think, have been diverted into saying, politicians are obsessed with themselves. This is all chaotic. No, this is about whether or not our democracy is safe from violent protest. And obviously we have to discover whether that is actually a reasonable characterisation of what happened. Did the Labour Party give the Speaker an incorrect impression that it was being intimidated when in fact it isn't being intimidated? Is that actually unfair to the protesters? I'm open to even that interpretation, but my suspicion is that their fears are genuine, And that is extremely concerning. And you're right to say, what's it coming to?
Yeah, absolutely. Lord Daniel Finkelstein, thank you very much indeed. We must talk again about this because it's not going to go away. Let's hear now from Conservative MP Andrea Jenkins. Andrea, welcome to the Independent Republican, Mike Graham. Thanks for joining us. There's no doubt, is there, that lots and lots of different MPs have had threats of one kind or another. We had a couple of MPs standing up today talking about how they felt more at home and safer in Israel than they do actually working and living in London. So what is this all about? Is Lord Finkelstein right to say if it's about democracy, if it's about cancelling debate because of violent threats, then we need to be very, very serious about making that change?
I mean, I think it's both, actually, Mike. I mean, I've had 8 death threats over the years, and I have CCTV at my home, and I've had people rip my gates down, my fences down, and it just goes on, and writing outside my office on the wall, "Why don't you just kill yourself, Andrea?" I had somebody with a looking to kill me down the high street. So I've had lots over the years, and I've only once wanted to quit over this. And then after about a month of mulling over it, I thought, sod you, I'm not going to let you beat me.
Right.
So I think it's a mixture. I mean, we wasn't party to the conversations. I'm very concerned that, the likes of Sue Gray and Starmer were seen speaking to the Speaker and also going in the whip's office. So what shenanigans was going on there? Clearly they didn't want the SNP vote as it was. But also, I think it makes Starmer look weak, Mike, because he's given in to the mob, isn't he? And we've seen the streets. It doesn't feel safe for British citizens, let alone MPs on the streets, does it? It's mob rule at the moment, and we shouldn't be silenced by the mob.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I mean, as you say, the difficulty as well in trying to work out what happened exactly is that we're not getting a straight bat really from the Labour Party. First, they denied that they'd spoken to Lindsay Hoyle at all last night. Now, today, they're saying that, well, we might have spoken to him, but we didn't threaten him in any way, shape or form. And certainly it's very clear that Starmer was worried that if there were Labour MPs who voted with the SNP amendment, that he would have another crisis on his hands. But what's happened now means that whenever there's another opposition day motion with the Labour Party putting it forward, presumably the SNP will now have to say, well, now you have to give us a go at an amendment as well, because that's what you did last time.
Exactly. And it set this dangerous new precedent, really, which was wrong. I mean, I do like Lindsay Hoyle. And as yet, I haven't signed that form calling him to resign. He clearly made a mistake. He is actually one of the good eggs, but I'm more concerned that we could have a future Prime Minister in Starmer who allegedly going around bullying people and getting the Speaker to allegedly break protocol. But let's not also forget as well that they've got the Rochdale by-election coming up. I know they've sort of disowned the candidate, but they still clearly want to win, because no doubt they'll give him the whip back if he wins anyway, won't they? And so we've seen that the Muslim vote is going away from Labour, and where it has always sort of gone to Labour. So I think what Starmer was doing was trying to shore that up, to show that he's still supportive to the Muslim community. So I think it's got so many elements to this on why this happened last night.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Andrew, thanks for that.